All right, let's get right into it. We're about to tackle one of the biggest mysteries out there, something that puzzles scientists and philosophers alike: consciousness. We're going to explore this massive question of how the physical world, atoms, neurons, all that stuff, could possibly create our rich inner world of thoughts, feelings, and experiences. The quest begins right now.
So, to kick things off, let me ask you a question. What's the one thing that's the most familiar to you in the entire universe, but at the same time, the most mysterious?
Yep, it's your own mind. Think about it. That little movie playing inside your head right now as you're listening to me, that first person experience. That's what's at the very heart of this whole puzzle.
And to get a bit more technical, philosophers have a word for this: qualia. It's not about just knowing you're seeing the color red. It's about the what it's likeness of seeing red. The actual feeling of redness. Or that sharp sting from a paper cut, or the unmistakable taste of coffee. Qualia are, well, they're the raw feelings of being alive.
Okay, so this leads us directly to what the philosopher David Chalmers famously called the hard problem of consciousness. Now, it's not about the easy problems, and I'm using air quotes here, like how the brain processes data or makes us walk and talk. No, the hard problem is much, much deeper. It asks, why? Why do we have any inner experience at all?
To put it another way, the challenge is this: how can a bunch of non-conscious physical stuff, neurons firing, atoms bumping into each other, little electrical zaps, somehow come together to create the vibrant technicolor first-person feeling of being you? How does matter become mind? That right there is the core of what we're looking into today. So the main way scientists and a lot of philosophers are trying to solve this puzzle is by looking for a purely physical answer. And this brings us to a really important idea called physicalism.
So what is physicalism? Well, at its core, it's the idea that consciousness isn't some kind of magic or some ghost in the machine. It's a natural phenomenon, and it can be completely explained by the physical stuff in laws of our universe, whether that's biology, neurology, computation, or even physics itself.
But, it's not like all physicalists are on the exact same page. There are kind of two main flavors. You've got reductive physicalism, which is super direct. It says consciousness is just brain activity. Period. Think of it like this: water is H2O. They're the same thing. Then you've got non-reductive physicalism. This one's a bit more subtle. It says consciousness arises from brain activity, but it's a new thing with its own properties. The best analogy is baking a cake. You have flour, sugar, eggs, but the deliciousness of the cake isn't in any single ingredient. It's a new property that emerges when you put them all together in the right way. Okay, so with that basic framework in mind, how are researchers actually trying to crack this case? Let's take a look at the modern toolkit, the different theories they're using to try and map this whole thing out. So everything really starts with those two philosophical approaches we just talked about. You have the reductive team trying to show that consciousness is just one-to-one with some physical thing. And then you have the non-reductive team arguing it's a new emergent property, that it's all about what the brain does, not just what it is. And from those big picture ideas, we get down to the nitty-gritty. Scientists are pursuing four major types of models to try and nail down the physical mechanisms of consciousness. Let's break them down. First up, you've got the neural theories. This is probably the most intuitive approach. These researchers are basically on a hunt for what they call the neural correlates of consciousness, or NCCs. The goal is simple: find the exact brain activity that lines up perfectly with a conscious experience. Like, if they could find a specific brainwave pattern that fires up every single time you experience the color red, and only then, well, they might have just found the physical home of redness. Next up, we have information-based theories. The big idea here is that maybe consciousness isn't about biology, about the wet stuff in our heads, but about the structure of information itself. The most famous one is integrated information theory, or IIT. It basically says that any system that can integrate a ton of information, meaning the info is both super complex and totally unified, is conscious. So consciousness could be a property of anything that processes information in the right way, not just brains. Then you've got the computational theories. This is the mind as computer model. The argument here is that consciousness is a specific kind of computation. It's not just any old calculation, it needs a special kind of software architecture. A really cool idea in this camp is the Global Workspace, which pictures consciousness as a kind of central bulletin board in the brain, where important information gets posted for all the other unconscious systems to see and use.
And finally, we get to the most, let's say, out there approach, quantum theories. These folks argue that the normal, everyday physics we're used to just can't cut it. They think you need to go down to the weird, spooky level of quantum mechanics to explain consciousness. The most well-known theory, ORC-OR, points to tiny little structures inside our neurons called microtubules and suggests that quantum effects happening in there are literally the source of our conscious experience.
So, okay, we have all these brilliant theories, all these powerful ways of looking at the problem. But there's a huge catch. Despite all this progress, the case is far from closed. And the reason for that is a massive, persistent roadblock known as the explanatory gap.
So what is this gap? Well, you can think of it as this giant chasm between the objective, third-person world of science, brains, neurons, information processing, and the subjective, first-person world of what it feels like to be you. We can map every neuron firing in a brain, but we still can't answer the most important question. Why does all that activity feel like anything at all?
And one of the classic ways to illustrate this gap is a thought experiment called the philosophical zombie. Just imagine a being that is physically identical to a person. It looks the same, acts the same, talks the same, but on the inside, there's nothing. No experience. The lights are on, but nobody's home. Now, the argument is, if you can even imagine such a creature exist, then it proves that consciousness must be something more than just the physical stuff. It's an extra ingredient that the physical description leaves out.
And the tough questions just keep coming. There's the knowledge argument. Imagine a neuroscientist who knows every single physical fact about color vision, but has only ever seen black and white. When she finally sees the color red for the first time, does she learn something new? And what about this? If our consciousness is just a side effect of brain activity, does it even have a purpose? Does it do anything? These are the kinds of puzzles that really put the pressure on any purely physical theory. So, all of this leaves us with the million-dollar question. Is consciousness even a solvable problem? Where does this epic quest stand right now? Well, here's the bottom line. Physicalism has given us incredible tools. It allows us to treat the mind as a natural phenomenon we can actually study. We can map brains, we can model information, we can do all this amazing science. And yet, for all that progress, that core mystery, the subjective what it's like to be part, still seems to be just stubbornly out of our grasp.
And so we're left with the ultimate question. As we keep pushing forward, digging deeper into the brain and the fabric of reality itself, will we finally build that bridge across the explanatory gap? Will we connect the physical world to our inner world? Or will our own mind always be the universe's greatest and most personal mystery?